With whom do we gather? Obviously, we gather with one another here. We like gathering with one another here, and it's fun to be in community with one another. For some time now, there's been a term that frequently appears to describe the willingness to defend and vote for individuals accused, even convicted of illegal behavior, inappropriate sexual behavior. And that term is tribalism, putting one's tribe ahead of principles and morals and values. Being a part of a tribe is rooted in our history. We are familiar with the Native American tribes who predated the arrival of Europeans and others from across the seas. The gangs of New York in the early 1800s were primarily ethnic gangs of Irish, Italians, and other Europeans who put protecting one's tribe ahead of all else. I'm a native of Texas, and there, France, Spain, Mexico, and eventually immigrants from the U.S. and Europe all governed Texas prior to its joining the Union. But again, communities were built around the dominant tribe and language of the area, with communities named as the new version of a community of origin of one's native land. Where my great-grandfather built a home that's on the historic register there, it's called New Ulm. Or in Texas, the three letters turn into two syllables, New Ulm. New Braunfels. Other communities that reflect the communities from which we came. But in a day where tribalism usurps democracy, and in a day when tribalism separates and divides us, perhaps we need to find a better way forward. In Texas, prior to Lyndon Johnson signing civil rights legislation into the law in the early 1960s, staunch Democrats would refer to themselves as yellow dog Democrats, meaning they'd vote for a yellow dog before they'd vote for Republicans. They associated Republicans with carpetbaggers who flooded into the South 100 years before to get rich off what was left following the destruction of the Civil War. By the 1980s, many of these yellow dog Democrats had changed tribes and they had become Republicans. The Southern strategy. And it was in reaction to the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, signed by Johnson. Motorcycle gangs like the Hells Angels and Banditos were in our tribes. Street gangs are forms of tribes. Take a minute and think, what's your tribe? One of our tribes is United Church of Christ at Parker Hilltop. It's a great tribe of which to be a part, absolutely. But what are some other tribes? Liberals, conservatives, independents, green persons, libertarians. With whom do we gather? 9 years ago, after there were riots in Charlottesville, Virginia, where my granddaughter is going to start college this fall at the University of Virginia. Anybody remember what was going on there? Individuals walking through one of Thomas Jefferson's favorite places, screaming and yelling, "The Jews will not replace us." Susan Thistlethwaite, President Emerita and former professor of theology at Chicago Theological Seminary, noted that when we have torch-carrying radicals marching around in Charlottesville, Virginia, yelling blood and soil and Jews will not replace us, it is time to confront this kind of tribalism with the historical courage of those who confronted the Nazis in the 1930s in Germany. We are not here merely to denounce, however. The most important thing we can do as Christian theologians is to announce the good news of the gospel. The good news is the radical inclusivity of God, for God so loved the world, not just some in the world who are rich, white, male, or heterosexual. God loves the whole world of animals and plants, the entire ecosystem that is a victim of the same rapaciousness and nearly mindless drive for political domination. The good news is an invitation to turn away from greed and turn toward love of neighbor. It's what Jesus ran into. Now, anybody love tax collectors? Well, I do. Some of them are my friends. Now, I don't necessarily like paying too much in taxes, but actually paying taxes is part of patriotism. But in Jesus' day, tax collectors were heinous because they were collecting Caesar's money. They were collecting taxes for religious leaders of their day, those who led the synagogues and the temples. And oftentimes, as we found out toward the end of Jesus' ministry, when you would come and offer a sacrifice or in celebration for new life, or you would come and bring a child for blessing and affirmation, and you brought whatever you had raised to be that gift and that sacrifice, you often ran into people that told you that wasn't good enough and you had to get some of their doves to offer. That's why Jesus overturned the tables in the temple. He said, "You have turned my parents' house into a den of thieves." Wow. So Jesus calls this tax collector named Matthew. Recognize the reading from Matthew? It says, "Come and follow me." And then the religious leaders of his day see Jesus and the disciples eating and fellowshipping with tax collectors and sinners. And they wanted to know why. And I think Jesus had to say under his breath, because they're a lot more fun. Think about it. He says, "Look, I come to care for those in need." And many of the religious leaders of his day, because they were leaders, felt they had no needs. We will share communion this morning, and in doing so, we are invited to claim this family of faith as part of a tribe with which we identify, in which we remember Jesus' invitation to break bread together. And when we leave this place, we may be a part of other groups with which we identify. And yet the meal calls us to connect on a deeper spiritual level that calls out our better angels to help us see others as part of God's family, as siblings in the faith, regardless of other tribes with whom they identify. I understand it's easier said than done. I get that. And yet Jesus calls us to follow Jesus' way. We continue in the story. Jesus in his day went where it wasn't comfortable for him to go. Eventually, it cost him his life. The religious leaders of Jesus' day were experts in Mosaic law, and they missed the mark in their application of the law. They applied the law as rules to be followed and not as means for building relationships with those of us who are considered outcast or unclean. Why does Jesus eat with tax collectors and sinners? Then one of the leaders comes running up to him. He didn't care that Jesus was eating with tax collectors and sinners. He didn't care that as a rabbi, his teachings went beyond the teachings of the law and incorporated the celebration, leadership, and teaching of the prophets as well. Those who called for justice in the land of injustice. One of these leaders has a daughter who's dying. And he just doesn't give a darn about all those things that were being said about Jesus. He was desperate. And he believed that Jesus could make a difference. And he comes running to Jesus and says, "Come, just touch my daughter and she'll be made well." How many times have we gathered at funerals, not like the one on Saturday that came at the end of a life very well lived, but we gathered died before their times. I was barely in 6th grade when one of my brother's good friends died of leukemia in 9th grade. All of us would have wished for someone being able to lay a hand on Buddy to help him live past the 9th grade. So he pleads for Jesus' help. And as he's going, then a woman with quote-unquote the issue of blood, she had a ongoing, for lack of a better term, period that would not heal and would not stop. According to the law, she was unclean, or at least according to the understanding of Jewish leaders of Jesus' day. And as soon as she touched the hem of his garment, he knows that healing power went out, and she was made well. Not because of something Jesus did, but because she had the faith to believe that he could make a difference. Jesus went where he wasn't supposed to go. He associated with people that needed the faith and needed the love of God, needed to know that the greatest commandment was to love the divine with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and the second was to love our neighbors as ourselves, and those included Samaritans and tax collectors and sinners and people who were ill and sick and considered not clean, and all of those like us, standing in the need of prayer, of hope, of encouragement and grace. Why did Jesus do it? It's because he desired mercy and not sacrifice. Every month, the missions committee meets to talk about how to divvy up funds that have been raised through the collection of cans, aluminum cans, and point of advertisement here. You can bring beer cans too. Okay, just remember that, and Dick will make sure we get missions money from turning in all the aluminum cans that we bring to him, not just Coke cans or Dr. Pepper or whatever. And the committee thinks about where can we spend the money to help. Beyond the walls of this beautiful sanctuary, spice packets to help those who are struggling. Hope and Help, which is a nonprofit I've discovered that works in the area in Boulder County, had all of their supplies and food stolen recently, and now they're having to put a sound system in. Security system, excuse me. So we gave what we could. Going to meet needs where we find them, not necessarily where we want them to be. We recognize easily the needs of the poor and the disenfranchised. But what about those who do not appear to have needs or hurts or doubts or fears? What about those who benefit from tax laws by keeping more of their millions and billions? Do they have needs? Do we see Jesus in those who appear to have no needs to which we might be drawn to minister? Can the wealthy be impoverished in spirit? Can those with whom we differ and have no apparent needs be people in whom we can see Jesus? Maybe those who are so determined to take from the support of the poor to give to the rich are imprisoned by their own ideological tribe. Can we see in those who are other to us a shared humanity, a person with needs, someone in search of a community that extends God's love and grace if we will give it a chance? Might we find a fellow struggler in need of hope and maybe a helping hand or a loving embrace? Maybe the miracle of healing we read about in the passage of the young woman is a healing for us, and the divisiveness with which seems to drive our culture today. Some may think the unity we long for is dead and gone. I believe it is only sleeping. And a new awakening of our better angels will come, perhaps even in our lifetimes. Frank Staley, a U.S. District Judge, wrote recently of John McCain's asking both Barack Obama and George W. Bush to speak at his funeral, which he knew was not too far away. Obama later said that when that call came, he felt sadness and also a certain surprise. And then, with the warmth that defined John McCain, Obama recognized exactly what McCain was doing, telling the mourners at the Washington National Cathedral on September 1, 2018, that the invitation showed McCain's irreverence, his sense of humor, a little bit of mischievous streak. Because, as Obama put it to a cathedral that erupted in laughter through their grief, what better way to get a last laugh than to make George and me say nice things about him to a national audience? It was John McCain's final act of political theater, and it was genius, choosing the two men who had each defeated him for the presidency to stand before the nation and celebrate his life, sending a message louder than any speech he could have given himself. That in America, rivalry and respect are not opposites. That the man you run against can still be the man you trust with your legacy. And that decency is not weakness, but the most durable form of strength. So maybe the unity we all long for is just sleeping. And maybe through our acts of grace and love and acceptance, regardless of the tribes and the titles that the tribes may have, that it's you and me and all of us who can be part of awakening that for which we long. May it be so again and soon. Amen. Now we come to the singing of our middle hymn, We Are Your People. It's New Christian Hymnal 309.